When I started reporting on homelessness, I always knew there are many ways that can lead to someone being unhoused. But there's a unique experience that really bothered me. That's foster youth at risk of experiencing homelessness. And unfortunately, I've met many over the past several years.
There is a possibility that I would end up on the street, but like my mentality is like, no, I'm gonna go get a job. Like, no, I'm not gonna be on the street. Like that's not an option.
That was Joel, a former foster youth that I met earlier this year. Luckily, he didn't end up unhoused, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to create a better support system for children who, through no fault of their own, end up living on the streets. Later, you'll also hear from Gail Winston, a manager of the Supportive Housing Division at LA's Department of Children and Family Services. She's going to share a personal story of why her work is important and why she fights so hard for foster youth. From HEATDRAWN Media, this is Reputation, a podcast that inspires you to think deeper, approach each other with better understanding, and goes beyond the surface of social issues. I'm your host, Ethan Ward, and this season is all about the intersection of reputation and homelessness. You're going to find nuanced conversations about the lives of people experiencing homelessness and the professionals who work with them. Foster youth children could enter foster care for reasons that include experiencing abuse, neglect, or abandonment. If foster youth are not reunited with their families, placed in new families, or in extended foster care by age 18, California's benchmark for the legal age of adulthood, they're on their own. I remember being kicked out of my parents' house at 18 and having to figure life out. I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I was technically experiencing homelessness years before I officially lived in my car. I stayed with friends from time to time. I wandered from place to place. I made a lot of bad decisions out of desperation just to survive. So now that I'm older, I'm deeply aware that no 18-year-old is ready to be out on their own, and certainly not a child who had no family support at all for whatever reason. I recently reported a story for Capital in Maine about AB 525, a bill making its way through the California Assembly that would increase the amount of money foster youth get to help with life expenses. Without it, foster youth often end up having to get creative about making money and being able to support themselves. That's why meeting Joel was interesting. He's fought really hard to not become a statistic or feed into stereotypes that follow a lot of foster youth. We sat down for a conversation recently at his apartment complex in Hollywood. When it comes to like your life, were there any ever like times where you thought I could actually end up on the street?
Honestly, like, yeah, like, you know, that there is a possibility that I would end up on the street, but like my mentality is like, no, I'm gonna go get a job. Like, no, I'm not gonna be on the street. Like that's not an option. Like it could happen. Like it's probably gonna happen the way my situation is going right now, but I'm gonna do everything in my power to not let that happen. So like that's why I was always working. That's why I was always selling everything that I could. Selling shoes, still selling shoes right now. Like, and I'm going to school.
Did you know people that ended up like on the streets, or like that somehow like you saw maybe at a group home and then later on they were like, you heard from someone like, oh, they're at a shelter or something like that?
Well, yeah, my really good roommate that I was with, like probably like in 2021 around like when COVID hit, everything was at home and I had ran into him or something, and he like, cause from time to time, like I have the same Instagram that I've had for the longest. So like from time to time he'll hit me up and be like, hey bro, like what's up? Like, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, yeah, let's link up, let's do something or whatever, you know, just to see him and talk to him, whatever. He was actually homeless around that time, and it was around like Thanksgiving, and he's like, yeah, bro, like, he's like, I was staying at my girl's house, but she kicked me out, and like, but he always had like mixed up stories, and I'm like, bro, like, is you telling the truth or not? I know you on the street, like, you know, like, you want me to wash your clothes or you want to come stay the night?
Do you think that's the reason that he probably felt like that, though, is because of people's perception of people that are on the streets and the things that people say?
Yeah, I do think of that. So I'm pretty sure he was like, and it wasn't even like me and my whole 10, 15 members in my family. It was like me, my dog, and probably like I think my girlfriend and him. Like, and I think he just felt weird about it or something, or like,
Are those things what kind of kept you making sure that you were always working and kind of hustling to make sure you were making money so you wouldn't end up being labeled as like a drunk or a bum or a drug addict or something like that?
Yeah. And like, I don't want to be another statistic, really. Like, the statistics are very high for people who be on the streets who are in foster care. Like drug problems, like there's a high statistic for that, and like there's a very low statistic. I think like probably 1 out of every 15 people in the foster care go to college or like graduate high school. Like those statistics are very low.
Yeah.
And like, I want to change that because it's rough, and I feel like a lot of people don't really talk about it, and like not a lot of people know about it. I feel like a lot of like the foster care system and stuff like that, it's kind of just swept under a rug and people don't really notice. But like majority of the people that are homeless too have been in the foster care. Majority of the people that are on the streets have been in the foster care, and like people don't think of that. I don't want to be on the streets, I want warm water. I want to be able to wake up, take a shower, and have a comfortable spot to stay at, have a bed, have a TV.
Well, you have that now. You live in a great building, you have a great apartment, you have, these comforts that you work so hard to get. So I would say that you did manage to escape that outcome.
People's mentality can either let it get to them, or like, their hardships get to them and affect them, and like, let it get to their mentality. And then there's some people that, want to go against the statistics and want to be, wants to do better. And you just got to want it for yourself,
Joel represents someone who is a survivor, but his journey hasn't been easy. He grew up in what's commonly known as group homes for foster youth. It came with its challenges, of course, especially when you're forced to live somewhere with other children who are also dealing with their own traumas. When they age out, a lot of foster youth have nowhere to go. But some end up moving on to other shared living spaces or with other people who also went through the foster care system. Usually, they find these homes through nonprofits or other kinds of agencies. But they're really hard because of the stereotypes that follow foster youth. Those same stereotypes are what sometimes keeps landlords from taking a risk on young people who are also living on the streets and letting them lease in one of their buildings. That's why Joel, managing to figure out housing and enrolling at a local community college, is so inspiring. He actually took me to a group home that he stayed at in Hollywood while he was in high school. It was practically underneath the shadow of the Hollywood sign. He told me how it inspired him to want more for his life and how it made him realize that he can also dream bigger despite growing up in foster care. I called Gail Winston, a manager of the Supportive Housing Division at LA's Department of Children and Family Services, and shared that part of Joel's story with her.
That allowed him to be able to dream and envision what he could have by being able to see how others are living that are paying regular rents and have had no connection with the system. And I may be overly optimistic, but I believe these can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I see that you did it. Now I can do it. I speak it into the atmosphere, and I start making these steps to make these type of things happen for me.
She isn't just talking either. Gail knows this from personal experience.
I'm from the deep South, Mississippi. I grew up. My mom was a maid. She had to quit school in the 5th grade to pick cotton. I'm the first person out of 7 children, 6 brothers, to be able to go to college. I was down in Mississippi. I passed to the 7th grade when they integrated schools. Prior to them integrating schools, we knew nothing about what the other side of town did. We just speculated in our minds. But once schools were integrated and we were exposed to even better quality education, because prior to the integration, we got the books that the other side of town used after they had completed them and they were outdated. Then they sent them to our side of town. where we were always lagging behind academically. But once they integrated the schools and we were able to go to schools with different diverse populations, we were able to excel and do even better, think greater beyond what our small little narrow world was prior to integration. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Her background is what drives a lot of her decision-making at DCFS when it comes to finding solutions so foster youth don't fall into homelessness.
Housing is a human right. If you put people in housing, this is why I support the Housing First philosophy. No matter what is going on, put people in comfortable, adequate housing first, then their stress and mental health will stabilize, where then they can begin to focus on other things that they need to do. I firmly believe that being homeless is one of the most critical mental health stresses that a person can endure.
In order to prevent foster youth from falling into homelessness, Gail told me that the DCFS implemented a new supportive housing division to prevent foster youth from slipping through the cracks. They're using what they call an enhanced exit process.
Because I want to be able to make sure we've touched every young person 90 days before they exit our child welfare system. Number one reason, to make sure they have an identified housing plan. My team reaches out to every social worker that has a youth that will be exiting in 90 days. And we're working to make sure as we move forward, not one youth will exit into homelessness.
Gail said this isn't a county-wide thing yet, but she's really optimistic that streamlining DCFS's process will help reduce the number of people falling into homelessness. That includes working with the Department of Mental Health, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LAHSA, and the Department of Social Services to make sure that foster youth know about any benefits that they're entitled to. The fact is that many young people, through no fault of their own, remain in the foster care system until they age out at 21. But like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't ready to be on my own at 18 years old, and I don't think that I had it all figured out 3 years later either. Gail agrees.
We can't expect our young people to have it all together. And Ethan, the most pressing thing that we need to talk about today is, even if they had it all together, what young person you know at 21 will be able to afford the exorbitant rental amounts out here in Los Angeles? So it's not just a simple thing. You got a job, full-time job. The rents are ridiculously expensive out here. I want to make sure everything that our young people are eligible for, that they get, to give them a better chance at having a successful life outside of our system.
One way that you can help make sure foster youth don't exit into homelessness is by becoming a foster parent yourself, especially to older foster youth who oftentimes aren't placed with families. If that's not possible, you can also volunteer with local organizations such as CASA of Los Angeles to give foster kids a voice as they navigate scary juvenile dependency courts. You can also donate to organizations like the Right Way Foundation in LA to help get youth housed or share opportunities for young people to get involved in. If you're not in the greater LA area and want to mentor, donate, or volunteer, go to fosternation.org or fostermore.org to find ways to get involved. I'll link to everything in the show's episode notes. Reputation is a production of HEATDRAWN Media. This episode was written, reported, and executive produced by me, your host, Ethan Ward. Sound engineering by Jeha Joshua Chang. Original music composition by James Ingram of Mega Dream Productions. Art and graphics by Kelly Bernard. We're grateful for your support. If you haven't yet, please rate and follow our feed in Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening now, or you can share the episode with your friends. Join the conversation on Twitter at ReputationPod or hit me up at I am Ethan Ward. You can also email us at reputation@heatdrawn.com.